The Alibi of Dawn. Chapter 1. The Letter That Knew My Name. On the morning my name learned to lie, the city didn't blink. Ho Chi Minh City kept doing what it always does at 7 in the morning, throats clearing, scooters stuttering themselves awake, vendors boiling broth into faith, while a single plain envelope lay on my kitchen counter, drinking light. My kettle muttered. The window sweated. I held the envelope by its corners, the way I hold everything that could ruin my life, and told myself to breathe. Linh Nguyen, said the letters on the front, each one an imitation of my own, not a photocopy, not printed, handmade, patient, almost tender. Whoever wrote it knew how my G's lean as if they're tired, how my N's prefer to pretend they're M's when I'm rushing, how the dot over my I is never quite a dot but a comet that forgot to land. It was my handwriting. Except it wasn't. I slid a scalpel under the flap because old habits never call to say they're coming. Forensic document examiners are taught to listen to paper the way a doctor listens to lungs. This envelope exhaled cleanly. No glue clots, no reseals. Inside, a single sheet, ivory, high cotton, watermark slanting pale like a cloud under ice. Lynn, don't go out tonight. He'll say it's a coincidence. He'll smile like he's always smiled, left side first, as if he's apologizing for it. He'll touch the back of your neck. If you go with him, you won't come back. Make an excuse. Make many, make any L. I read the last line twice because it was the only part that was honest. L, the way I sign my emails when I'm tired or when I want to feel closer to someone than a full name allows. I set the letter on the counter and stared through it until the water stain in the far corner of my apartment drifted into a map. The kettle clicked off. A crowd outside my window applauded nothing in particular. I put my thumb on the capital D in don't and felt for pressure. The downstroke was hard, the lift clean, as if the writer cared deeply and then decided not to. The crossbar on the T had a habit I hate in myself, a hitch, a slight climb upward at the end, like a staircase to nowhere. Whoever had written this had watched my hand write itself for years. No one knew I'd started seeing him. Not even my best friend. Not even my father. Not even the version of me who lives in the mirror and takes notes. I had intended to keep it that way, not out of shame, but because I liked the space between what I felt and what anyone could know about it. We met on a Tuesday when thunderstorms were scheduled and then canceled. He came into the lab with a courier bag and a question that should have been simple. "Can you tell," he asked, "when a signature is trying not to be itself?" "It depends," I told him, "on the pen, the paper, the writer, the lie." His name was Kai. The first time he shook my hand, he looked at it rather than into my eyes. Not out of shyness, but out of curiosity, as if he were trying to memorize the way fingers announce their conspiracies. He had the kind of smile that sounds like a secret telling you it will behave. Left side first, the letter had warned, and I wanted to laugh. My favorite detail about him was apparently someone else's warning label. I made coffee because there are only two ways to deal with a threat. Examine it until it confesses, or pretend you didn't hear it. While the ground scabbed and bloomed, I held the letter up to the window. In certain light, I could nearly see the meaning behind the ink, the shaky breath between words, the decision to warn me made and remade with every letter. Forgery isn't just imitation, it's narration. Whoever wrote this was telling a story about me I hadn't told anyone. My phone vibrated across the counter like a nervous insect. Kai, 7:30 at Cafe Zephyr. They're doing that open mic thing again. Don't make me endure bad poetry alone. I smiled despite the sliver of cold behind my ribs. I had met him at Cafe Zephyr 2 months ago because my lab is 3 doors down and my willpower is 3 degrees under caffeinated. The Zephyr is the kind of place where people say they're writing screenplays when they are, in fact, writing shopping lists. It sits at the lip of an alley that collects secrets and returns them in different shapes. He had been at the back table, his courier bag at his feet, his laugh unwillingly audible. A couple argued at the counter in pairs of syllables. I remember thinking, here is a place where you come to confess, and if the ceiling fan is listening, it has the decency to pretend it's sleeping. I typed, Linh, I'll be there, 7:30. If the poetry is bad, we'll leave and pretend we were never there. I put the phone down and examined my reflection in the microwave door. My eyes were the kind that brokers call reliable. My hair did what I told it to, only when it felt like it. My face was a commentary someone had annotated in pencil too many times. I made a decision. I didn't believe in fate, and I wasn't ready to start. I believed in pressure variations, in the way ink feathers under heat, in how liars save their best lies for when they're telling the truth. But the letter had said, don't go out tonight. I took a photo of it. I opened my laptop. I zoomed until the fibers in the paper looked like a country I had once escaped. The writing had been done with a 0.5 gel pen, pilot, likely, black. But the ink had pooled in the L's the way it does when the writer hesitates. The ascenders suggested someone who had learned cursive from a European teacher or from a father who had. The loops in the Y's were not mine. They were too open, like doors, insisting they never close. There was also a small nick on the left foot of the capital H in heel, a nick I recognized with the same shock you feel when you see yourself from behind. When I was 8, my father taught me how to sign my name in his kitchen in District 3, his hands guiding mine. He used to say it was there in the pen where people hid what they couldn't afford to say aloud. He had cut his finger that morning while slicing green papaya, and a drop of blood had punched the counter. A clumsy period. He laughed and told me to add a tiny notch on the left foot of every capital I wrote, so you'll know it's yours in a crowd. The notch in Hill's H was not mine, not exactly, but it was a cousin of mine. A learned habit held in common with only one other person I knew. My sister, Mai, had died 7 years ago on a road that changed its mind too quickly. The morning it happened, I had been in another city, listening to another kettle think itself into steam. There are certain kinds of grief that come with a sound, and mine had been the silence a phone makes before it decides to ring. We were not identical, not even close. She had been wide where I was narrow, loud where I was careful, generous with her laughter where mine required bribery. But every letter we had ever written to each other wore the same quiet notch on the left foot of certain capitals, a private accent only we could hear. She was gone. Graveyard gone. Birthday cake with one too few candles gone. I poured the coffee and watched the surface swirl like a rumor inventing itself, and then I set the cup down without drinking, because caffeine and questions shouldn't be mixed without proper supervision. The letter lay on the counter like a sleeping animal. My apartment felt too small for it. I imagined taking it to the lab, putting it under the microscope, letting the hidden speeches speak. But there are things you don't bring to work, like a heart too awake, like a warning with your name on it. At 7:18 I was walking, The city's heat had decided to forgive us for a few hours, and people were outperforming normalcy. Couples detouring into more private alleys, teenagers pretending they weren't being watched, an old woman counting her change as if it were rosary beads. The Zephyr's neon sign stuttered itself on and then held. The open mic had already started. A young woman was up on the makeshift stage, admitting to crimes no one would ever prosecute, falling for the wrong person, calling her mother only when necessary, finishing books she hated out of pity. Kai was at our table in the back, an empty seat waiting like an answer he already had. "You came," he said, standing, that left corner smile appearing as if it had been called. "I said I would," I told him. "I read that your profession is good at telling the truth who taught it to lie," he said, sitting, his hand grazing the back of my neck, just like the letter suggested it would. Electric certainty shot through me, then embarrassment at having been primed. "How was your day?" "Ordinary," I lied. We listened. Someone read a poem about a dog that made me want a pet, which is the definition of good poetry. Someone read a poem about a war the city refuses to stop telling itself bedtime stories about. There's a kind of silence a room makes when it is deeply relieved not to be a courtroom. I held Kai's gaze at the unimportant moments. He had brought me a sesame cookie wrapped in the day's newspaper. He said he didn't know why, but the cashier had insisted I unwrapped it anyway, because superstition is just laziness with better PR. On the inner page of the newspaper, someone had circled a story. A man found dead near the Saigon River, no identification. The only thing he had in his pocket was a key without a house. The circle had been made with black ink, the line precise. A small notch in the left foot of the capital T in the headline whispered, "Hello." "Strange," I said. "Strange sells papers," Kai said. "My father used to circle stories he wanted to tell me about. I hated it." "What kind of stories?" "Stories where someone ran away but left behind a note. He thought I needed proof that people could choose." The cookie crumbled like a promise that never intended to survive its own telling. I ate it anyway. The young woman on stage rhymed the word dark with park in a way that made me forgive her. Kai's shoulder brushed mine. "There's a geometry to intimacy. How much space you leave so that the miracle of contact can keep being a miracle. I found my angle and kept it." "Do you believe in coincidence?" I asked him. "I believe in timing," he said. "Coincidence is just timing with a better agent." It should have made me laugh. It did. But the letter leaked into my laughter like ink into too thin paper. After the fourth poet confessed to wanting to be famous for kindness, Kai leaned over and said, "Let's go. I can only handle so much vulnerability before I start confessing crimes I didn't commit." We stepped onto the street. The alley had shifted shape in that way alleys do when you stop believing you're safe. A scooter coasted by like a shark. Somewhere, a bottle broke itself into excuse. Kai's hand found mine, and I let it. The night had the decency to pretend it wasn't watching. "Come up to the roof," he said. "There's a wind, and I think it's been hired to make us look like the end of a movie." We climbed the stairs of his building 2 doors down, the kind of concrete staircase that has seen more cigarettes than sunlight. On the landing between 4 and 5, a child had drawn a dragon eating a cloud, and the cloud seemed to be enjoying it. We emerged into the soft wind he promised. The city laid itself out like a lover you have no right to. The river threw back a ribbon for anyone willing to catch it. "I moved here last year," he said. "I thought a smaller apartment would make me own less of the wrong things." "And did it?" "I still own too many things that can break, and He looked at me when he said it. I wanted to believe he meant dishes. Why the courier bag? I asked. He touched it, as if to make sure it was still attached to this version of him. Habit. It reminds me to leave. From what? Depends on the hour. The wind did its hired work and put a hand through my hair, a courteous stranger. The letter insisted on existing. Don't go out tonight. Make an excuse. Make many. Make any. I looked at Kai's left corner smile and wanted to trust it was simply a mouth remembering how to be happy. I told myself to be precise. A warning is not a prophecy. A pattern is not a verdict. Why did you come to my lab? I asked. He dragged his finger along the parapet and made a line in the dust, a horizon. Someone told me you were good at explaining what writing tries to hide. I needed to understand old letters from my mother. He stopped, then smiled, not because he was happy, but because he needed to plug a leak with something. She used to write me from wherever she was pretending to be from. Where are the letters? And he looked at me as if deciding what kind of trust this was. Then he put his bag on the ground and opened it. Inside were camera lenses and a set of keys on a ring and a book of matches with the word hush embossed on it. Underneath was a smaller pouch. He drew out a bundle wrapped in a scarf faded red, soft enough to know secrets, and unwrapped it. Letters ribboned together, their edges browned, their stamps out of history. Can I asked. Only if you tell me when she started to lie. I took one at random. The ink had the tremor of someone who writes on trains. The date was the 16th of June, 2009. The paper smelled faintly of chlorine and overeager perfume. The letters themselves tried to be careful and failed in the way a careful person fails when they decide to feel something anyway. There it was, the notch on the left foot of a capital R. My father, my sister, me, and now a mother I didn't know. What was your mother's name? I asked. He said. The world arranged itself in new furniture. I stopped breathing out of politeness. The letter in my kitchen had watched me do this once and written itself accordingly. For a second, the roof, the river, the city, they all stepped back to let the coincidence be alone with itself. My sister's name was Mai, I said. No, he said, not disbelief but wonder. No, yes, I thought maybe you chose me because you saw it, because you wanted. I didn't know, I told him too quickly. I didn't know. He nodded, as if cheering for a world where people don't choose each other for tricks. He put the letters back, careful in the way of someone handling a life long after it has stopped pretending to be one. He closed the bag and leaned against the wall and smiled because the night asked him to. Tell me something true, he said. I thought of the letter on my kitchen counter, of the warning that had been written in a hand that knew mine the way a shadow knows its owner. I thought of the notch, of my father, of how easily the past sits down in present time as if the chair belongs to it. I looked at Kai's left corner smile. He touched the back of my neck with that gentleness that makes you want to leave the rest of the world untouched forever. I used to believe, I said, that if I understood how a lie was made, I would stop being hurt by it. And now I think I want to be surprised by honesty. The wind agreed with me in the only language it speaks. We stayed on the roof until the city dimmed. We walked back downstairs, the stairs choosing new noises to make. On the way down, he stopped at his door, and I continued to mine 2 floors below, promising to text, to sleep, to dream as if it were a job. At my door, someone had slid a postcard under it. The postcard was of the Notre Dame Cathedral before the fire. The stones lit the way you light faces you love. On the back, in tight print that had borrowed my impatience, it said, "You didn't listen. You never do. Look at the photo you took tonight." Then, smaller, a line that could have been an afterthought or a thesis, "Do not turn around." I froze because that is what you do when someone throws you a command with your name under it, even if the name isn't written. The hallway behind me was quiet, except for the building deciding whether to believe in gravity. I slid my phone out like a priest handling a relic, opened the camera roll, and stopped at the last photo from the roof. A city, a river, my shoulder, the edge of Kai's smile, and there, in the glass of a rooftop access door behind us, a reflection I did not remember, a woman 20 feet away, watching, her face half hidden by the angle, her hair too familiar. In the reflection, she was holding something that could have been a letter. "Do not turn around. The building is an animal. You can hear its bones." Someone was in the hall, or the hall wanted me to believe someone was. I did not turn around. I entered the apartment backwards, locked the door with the care of a surgeon sewing a wound, and retrieved the morning letter from the counter as if it might offer an alibi. The capital H was still nicked. I went to my laptop and did what I do when the world refuses to be one thing at a time. I compared the curves, the strokes, the places where ink goes to die when a writer doubts their own sentence. Whoever had written both had watched my hand learn itself and then go somewhere else entirely. I tried not to think of how that could be true if the person I had learned my hand with was in a cemetery with lilies that refused to apologize for their smell. My phone vibrated. "Unknown number." "I thought you'd have learned by now. Don't make me be the bad guy." "Not again." I stared at it until the words went on strike and refused to stand in a line. Then I did what I had told the letter I would not do. I went to my bookshelf and reached behind a row of books. No One Visits, barcodes still stuck like price tags on shame, and pulled out the box. I promised myself I wouldn't open until I had a better reason to survive my own curiosity. Mai's letters. I had kept them because grief has a hoarder's ethic. I had not read them all because grief also has rules about rationing. I opened the top one, dated a year before she died, and pressed the paper to my face like a saint who had forgotten how to kneel. The words didn't care that I was desperate. They were the kind of careful you are when you are writing to someone who thinks carefulness is a confession. Every capital she wrote had that notch, that "Hello, who are you?" In the second paragraph, a sentence, "If you ever fall in love, Lynn, make sure there's somewhere for the truth to sit down. Lies get tired quickly." I laughed because the only other option was to dismantle myself carefully and put the pieces away in labeled bags. I folded the letter and replaced it and took my phone onto the balcony where the city had peeled itself away into a map of its own arguments. I dialed my father, then hung up, then dialed again. When he answered, he said my name in the voice mothers and fathers are issued on the day they realize they can't fix everything. "Bah," I said. "Did Ma ever send letters to anyone else?" "Of course," he said. "She thought she could convince the world to behave." "Why?" "Did she know a woman named I?" Watched my mouth decide and then fail. "Never mind. Another time." "You're not sleeping," he said. "I'm fine," I lied again. "I just needed to hear someone say my name." He did, and I let the syllable hold me up. When we hung up, I looked at the postcard again, then at the reflection in the roof photo, then at the lock. I made tea I had no intention of drinking. I smoked a ghost cigarette on a balcony I knew better than to trust. I slept badly. At 4 in the morning, a sound took the shape of knocking and then admitted it. 3 precise taps, as if someone were counting themselves into a song. I sat up and tasted metal. I went to the door, looked through the peephole, and found the hallway doing its best impression of empty. On the floor outside my door lay a key, no label, no ring. Brass, bruised by other lives, attached with tape. A note: "This opens the memory you're afraid of. L." My breath went organized and then quit its job. I lifted the key. It had teeth designed to recognize only what they were meant to. I wanted to call Kai. I didn't. I wanted to call the police. But what would I say? Someone is using my handwriting to tell me all the ways I've refused to forgive myself. Someone is slipping their hands under the past and making it sit up. At 7:12, I was at the lab as if a part of me had never left. The building is old enough to be superstitious and young enough to be taken seriously. My office is a room that prefers to say no. I put the key on the table and stared at it until I felt ridiculous, then less ridiculous, then ridiculous again. I placed the letters beside it like witnesses I wasn't ready to question. At 8, my assistant Vi came in with a face full of the news she always thinks is bad for me, but turns out to be about celebrities or the price of durian. "Boss," she said, holding up her phone as if it were a bird she had been asked to rescue, "there's a client asking for you by name. He says it's urgent." "Who?" She placed the phone in my hand. A familiar voice said my name gently. It was the kind of gentle that comes from practice or regret. "Lynn," he said, "it's Detective Pham. We met after your sister." "I remember," I said, trying not to follow my voice back into the wrong season. "What can I do for you?" "Bandage." He cleared his throat, then coughed the way men cough when they would prefer to admit to a small sin instead. "We found something that belongs to you. It was in a storage unit we opened this morning as part of an unrelated investigation. There was a box. It had your name on it and a note." "What kind of note?" "One that made me call you instead of pretending to keep my professionalism." "What did it say?" "Please give this to Lynn Nguyen when she is ready to forgive me." And then, "The key is with her. She'll know the door." He paused. "The signature looks like yours. He's have body." He was have desas. I looked at the key on my table with a kind of loathing reserved for mirrors that tell the truth in bright light. "Where is the unit?" I asked. "District 4, he said. "Do you want me to come get you?" "No," I said. "I'll come to you." I hung up. Vi watched me with that affection that has learned to pretend it's not there. "Is it bad?" she asked. "I think so," I said, and then, because she would worry otherwise, "It might be good pretending to be bad." "That's worse," she said. She went to get coffee, and I texted Kai. "Lynn, can we meet at noon?" "Zephyr, there's something strange I need to show you." No response. It was early. He could be sleeping or pretending to. I put the letters back in the box. I took the key and slipped it into my pocket, where it could make promises to the lining. I told Vi I would be back by 2. I told the building I would be good. I told myself not to be dramatic. Then I took a motorbike taxi to District 4. Storage has a smell. If you know, you know. Dust doing calculus. Old fabric confessing to mold. The air is a museum that volunteers have forgotten to attend Detective Pham met me at the entrance with the polite sorrow of a man who does not want to be in the chapter where you are. "Thank you," I said, and he nodded as if thanks were a fact he wished would become true. He walked me down a corridor of corrugated doors until we stopped at one whose paint had made decisions no one had agreed with. He lifted the metal, and the door rolled up with a sound like fear being pulled out of a throat. Inside, a single box sat in the middle like an altar. "Lynn," said the lid, the paint thick, the letters open and clear. I didn't touch it. Instead, I looked for everything that wasn't it. A scuff on the concrete where something heavier had been dragged, then changed its mind. A cigarette butt that had been stepped on before it had a chance to confess. On the wall, a chalk mark that could have been a time 3:11 or a date 3/11 or nothing at all. "Mind if I asked. "Go ahead," he said. I put on gloves because habit is kinder than hope. I lifted the lid and felt a pressure change as if the room had decided to listen. Inside, a stack of photographs bound by twine, a sealed envelope, a small velvet pouch, and a black notebook with a rubber band around it like a restraint. The envelope first, because it was performing obedience. Inside was a letter. The ink had that same pilot patience. The loops said they wanted to be doors. The notch on the capital said the writer had known my father once, or had known me better than I did. "Lynn, I'm sorry I am not there to explain this in person. I knew if I tried, you would make me go slow, and I'm out of time for slow. The notebook is an index to a life. Not mine, yours. Read it, or burn it. There are ways to turn around without moving. Forgive me when you can. Don't forgive me if you must. L." I wanted to throw the letter into the river I had built in my head. I did not. I took the notebook and sat on the cold floor without asking permission from my knees. The first page was numbered 001, and in the corner a small sketch of a keyhole. The entries were short. Dates, times, places, then single-sentence dispatches to a version of me I didn't remember being. 001, the 3rd of June 2017, 1542, Cafe Vent. You will meet a man who thinks he knows how to hide the thing he's most proud of. Laugh at his joke. It will save you later. 002, the 19th of July, 2017, 9:10. Lab. Don't sign the delivery receipt. It's not yours. The signature matters. 003, the 25th of September 2018, 22:1, Rooftop. If you're looking at the river, you're facing the wrong direction. The door is behind you. I flipped. The entries went on like this: a diary written by a practical ghost who knew I would ignore instructions unless they came packaged as maps. I reached 137 before I realized my hands were shaking. 137. The 11th of October, 2025, 7:12. Lab. The key is in your right front pocket. Don't drop it when you realize who I am. I looked at the key. The room became an elevator and forgot to tell me what floor we were on. "What is it?" Detective Pham asked, because he had the nerve to be a man doing his job kindly. "I don't know," I said. And then, because it was nearly noon and I had promised Kai, and also because I wanted to be told I was being dramatic, "I have to go." He tried to insist on taking me home. I insisted in return that he let me be the kind of person who is allowed to make her own mistakes. He gave me his card again, as if I had not kept it under a magnet shaped like a lemon on my refrigerator for years. I left the storage unit with the notebook, the key, and a feeling that my life had sent me a syllabus I had neglected to buy the textbook for. At 12:04, the Zephyr was overlit and underpopulated. The open mic had ceded the stage to a man with a laptop and a grimace. I sat at the back table with the notebook open to 138 because denial is best practiced in increments. 138, the 11th of October 2025, 12:30, Zephyr. He won't come. He will text you instead. You will be angry at the text because you'll think it's a refusal, but it's a location. Go. I looked at my phone the way a gambler looks at a deck that owes him money. It was silent until it wasn't. Kai. Something came up. I'm sorry. Meet me on the footbridge behind the old post office at 1. Please. I hated the predictability of my relief as much as I loved it. I closed the notebook because I wanted to pretend I had arrived at my next decision alone. I walked through the heat that had decided to respect us for once. The post office posed as itself, proud and yellow, accepting postcards to places where people pretend to be leaving. The footbridge behind it arched like a question composing itself too quickly. Kai stood in the middle, his courier bag where it always was, his smile arriving on time. Before you say anything, he said, I need you to look at this. He handed me a photograph. It was printed on matte paper the way people print photographs they don't want to have to pretend to love. The image, Kai sitting across a table from a woman who looked exactly like me, except her hair was shorter and her mouth knew something mine did not. The time stamp in the corner said the 11th of October 2025, 13:24. 24 minutes from now. I found it in my bag this morning, he said. I didn't put it there. We stared at the future we were apparently scheduled to have. The woman who was me, who wasn't me, had her left hand on the table, palm up, as if mid-argument or mid-confession. Kai's left corner smile was there, apologizing again. Is this a trick? I asked. I don't know, he said. What if it's a threat? I said. What if it's a promise? He said, then looked as if he regretted saying anything that tender in a city that collects such things and resells them. I looked behind us and then ahead and then into the water where everything pretends to flow in one direction. I took the key out of my pocket without intending to and held it up to the light. It flashed once, a coin trying to be brave, and in the flash I saw, briefly, my own outline in the reflection of his sunglasses, and behind that outline, a woman standing at the edge of the bridge, watching. Her hair short, her posture like a punctuation mark. I turned around because sometimes instructions are insults. The bridge was an animal again. People moved in ordinary grammar. No woman, nothing to look at except everything. I felt the photograph in my hand like an obligation. Lin, Kai said softly, I need to ask you, do you think someone is trying to make us distrust each other? I think, I said, and then stopped because the sentence ahead of me was a cliff. I think someone is trying to rewrite a story that went wrong. What does that mean? It means I don't know which of us was wrong first. He reached for my hand, and because fear and longing are cousins and therefore terrible influences, I gave it to him. We stood there holding something between us that knew how to be fragile elegantly. The city decided to sneeze a horn. A tourist decided to take a photograph of something other than us. The river decided to continue. At 13:24, because the world is vain and likes to meet its own predictions, a woman who could have been me but wasn't walked past the end of the bridge, close enough to touch if we'd learned anything from movies. She did not look at us. She looked at the water as if it had taught her something she had no intention of mentioning. Her hair was short. Her mouth wore knowledge my mouth had not been introduced to. In her right hand, a key flashed once, then not again. I whispered before I could be kind to myself. The woman paused, as if the wind had called her name, then kept going, disappearing into a crowd that had not yet agreed to exist. I started forward. Kai held me back, not with force, but with the kind of asking you can't refuse. Wait, he said, and the word meant, if it's her, she's decided what she is to us, and if it isn't, then we should decide carefully. Do you believe in ghosts? I asked him. I believe in mistakes that refuse to die, he said. Is there a difference? If there is, I don't want to know it. I looked again at the photograph, at the future it insisted on, at the time stamp that had just turned into a past. I looked at the key in my hand and thought of the storage unit, the notebook, the letter signed with my name by someone who wore my choices like a borrowed dress. Come with me, I said. There's something I have to show you, and I need you to tell me if I'm losing my mind in a way you can still love me through. He didn't answer quickly enough to be reassuring. Then he nodded, which is all an answer can when it's intended to be brave. We walked, following a map neither of us admitted to having, back toward District 4 and its rooms with doors that liked to audition as mouths. When we arrived, Detective Pham was not surprised. Men like him don't believe in surprise because it feels like a failure of inventory. He nodded at Kai the way men nod when they are trying to decide which conversations their daughters would forgive them for. He looked at me and then at the box and then at the notebook I carried like a confession I wasn't done making. I can give you 15 minutes, he said. Then I need to pretend I'm in charge again. We went inside and the door performed the same throat clearing. The box waited politely. I lifted out the stack of photographs and untied the twine. They spilled a life onto the concrete. Me in places I had been, me in places I had not. The lab's hallway, the Zephyr, my father's kitchen, a roof with a river on it, a mirror that refused to tell me what frame it preferred. In each, a small mark in a corner, a keyhole, sketched like a private joke. In many, a second figure in the background, out of focus, wearing a posture that nostalgia would later trick me into calling familiar. The last photograph was of a door. It could have been any door except it was not. The paint was a color I have always defended beyond reason, something between grief and prayer. The knob was brass, dented where impatience had introduced itself. At the bottom, scrawled into the wood long enough ago to have acquired an accent, a single word, forgive. On the back, an address. Kai looked at me as if to say, I will go where you think you have to go, even though I suspect this is how bad stories get better at being worse. Detective Pham looked at me as if to say, I will pretend I didn't hear you decide what you just decided. I looked at the key in my hand, at the notch on the letter's capitals, at the notebook's insistence that maps are sometimes diaries in disguise. I put the key in my pocket and the photograph in my bag and my doubts into a box I labeled later. We stepped out into the day that was pretending to be afternoon, and the city opened its palm. I didn't lock the storage unit behind me, because some doors are only honest when they think they're being watched. We crossed a street that prefers pedestrians who pray. The address led us to an old apartment block that had survived the wrong kind of love. The staircase was a familiar animal. On the third floor, a corridor like a throat led to a door like the one in the photograph. The paint, that religion of mine, the brass bruised, the word forgive carved low, as if a child had been trying to teach a door to read. My hand shook in that dignified way that tries to pass for calm. I put the key into the lock and turned, not because I believed this would save me, but because not doing it would keep me awake longer than the truth would. The lock obliged, as if it had been waiting for nothing else. The door opened to a room that had clearly been expecting me. On the table, a tape recorder old enough to have retired, and a single cassette labeled with my name, the handwriting mine without being my own. On the wall, a collage of photographs and notes, red thread refusing to apologize for its cliché. In the center, a mirror. In the mirror, me, and behind me, as if she had always been there, a woman whose hair was shorter and whose mouth knew something mine did not. "Hello, Lynn," she said. Her voice was the one my memory had spent 7 years avoiding. My knees remembered how to forget me. The room did the decent thing and went quiet. She stepped forward with her hands up the way you approach a dog that belongs to someone you used to be. "I need you to let me explain before you decide what to call me," she said. Kai's hand found my back and did not leave. "Are you?" I began. But the word wouldn't let me finish, as if names were bridges you don't cross until you're sure the water is dressed appropriately. The tape recorder waited, the red thread waited, the mirror waited, and the city, even with all its excellent distractions, waited with us. "Hi," the woman said again, softer. "It's me." The tape recorder clicked on by itself, or the room wanted me to think so. I turned toward the sound because sometimes the only way to survive a story is to let it tell itself. Chapter 2. The Room with the Door That Remembered Us. The tape recorder waited like a confession that had practiced its timing. The button was already low, the red circle an embarrassed eye. When the tape began, it did not hiss so much as breathe an inhale from a throat that had been quiet too long. "Lynn," said the voice. I did not need my name to be that precise to know it. Every syllable was an old stair my foot remembered how to climb. The room contracted. Kai's hand at my back went still, as if that were the one thing that would keep us from falling. "If you're hearing this," the voice went on, "it means the door recognized you. I'm sorry to make your life feel like a riddle, but I needed your mind to arrive before your fear did." She laughed, then my sister's laugh, the kind detainees invent to prove they are still people. I closed my eyes, and it arranged everything behind my lids into an instant. Birthdays with candles you blow as if they're witnesses, last fights that choose the wrong adjectives. The morning, the phone gathered itself to ring. "I'm going to tell this the way we used to tell ghost stories," she said, "with the truth first, so the lies have to work harder." Kai moved to my side, and in the mirror across the room we were three. Me, the woman with short hair whose mouth knew things mine had not been introduced to, and him, positioned at my shoulder, as if hired by the concept of faith. The woman her did not look away from me. She had the posture of someone ready to be forgiven for the right reasons and refused for the wrong ones. "I didn't die," said my sister's voice. "A man I love did." The tape clicked softly, as if nodding for her. "I thought I could fix what wasn't mine to fix. I thought I could borrow time. I was wrong about both. I hurt you with the way I decided to survive. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me before you write the ending." On the tape, a chair made the sound chairs make when they take a side. Paper unfolded. You could hear how a hand refuses to be called gentle, but is anyway. Years ago, I took a job with a small firm that handled property transfers in District 7. I told you I was doing community work. That wasn't a lie. I just left out whose community it was. There was a ring, not dramatic like the movies. No gunmetal glamour, just a tidy economy of loss. They forged death certificates, wills, deeds. They were very good at making the story fit the paper. Families woke up to find their dead had signed things no living person would. When they complained, someone pointed to a signature and said, "Look, she wanted this." My stomach performed what I've always done when the world is too well arranged. It disagreed with gravity. I thought I could dismantle it from the inside. I learned their methods. I fed copies to a detective who, if he's kind, he's there with you now. If he's not kind, he'll hear this later and wonder if kindness would have made a difference. I looked at the door, remembered how Detective Pham had lifted it for us, his face practicing grief the way professionals practice their signatures. The woman in the mirror watched me look. "They found out?" Mai's voice said. "Of course they did. I ran toward the river because the river listens. He came after me, Hui. His name doesn't matter now except to me. He thought if he could make the scene look like an accident, the paperwork would be easier. He was right about that. He was always right about the wrong things. There was a sound then that I could not translate. Maybe it was memory. "He didn't push me," she said quietly. "He pushed the boy behind me, a delivery kid who had the bad luck to be in my story when it needed a witness to go away. They said later they found a man with no name and a key with no house near the Saigon River. I made the wrong decision. I made several. I let them believe I was the one who had gone under. I needed them to stop counting me. It was the only way to free my hands." Kai's breath broke a little on the intake. Earlier at the Zephyr, the newspaper circle around the nameless river body, my mouth was a shape the language had not considered. "I came to you," she said, "and I watched you sleeping, and I decided it would be kinder to hurt you all at once than slowly." The tape paused as if ashamed of its job. "I built a way to talk to you without announcing myself," she went on. "Do you remember how Ba taught us the notch at the left foot? You and I wrote letters for each other our whole lives. You know how my G's inhale. You know how your R's pretend to have shoulders. I learned to write you. It was easier than I wanted. Forgery is a love language if you forgive it for being so arrogant." Her voice smiled, and I hated that I could hear it. "I signed them, love, because I needed you to believe you were saving yourself. And you are. You always have. But there was someone else I needed to reach too." She let a margin breathe. "Kai," she said. My name and his were suddenly domestic together. "If you're with her, thank you for not leaving when you should have. I know how you smile. I know you're tired of people reading your face like notes they've already decided how to grade. Your mother wrote letters from names that did not belong to her. She worked for them my ring before she understood what it cost. She started to tell the truth when telling the truth was the most dangerous job. She gave me the first ledger. They punished her by not letting her absence be official. I'm sorry. A lot of what happened isn't my story to tell, but some of it is my fault anyway." On the mirror's edge, the woman's eyes did not blink. She was not the voice, but she carried it like a lake carries sky. "I set up a place with a door that would recognize the right kind of stubborn key," the tape said. "I filled it with the version of the story the ring forgot to forge. A notebook, an index, because you like indexes, Lynn. The entries aren't prophecies, they're choreography. Predictions are just plans with better PR. I wrote them to keep you ahead of people who don't know how to love anyone they can't control. I made myself your handwriting because it is the one you trust when you're tired." The tape clicked as if it had put its palm on the table. "If you're hearing this, It means we're nearly done with pretending to be strangers. There's one more thing. You will be tempted to give the ledger to the police and to forgive yourself for the 7 years you spent hating the wrong ghost. Do the first, don't rush the second. Love is slow on purpose. Silence. A small one, the size of a held breath. Then, turn around. The machine stayed pressed into its own pause. I turned. The woman in the mirror had stepped out of reflection and into the room, up close. Her face rearranged the way memory does when you let it. It was my sister's and not my sister's, cheekbones that remembered our father's smile, a jawline that had negotiated its independence, a scar that had not been in any of my photographs except the ones I had tried to forget. She opened her hands as if I had dropped something in them years ago, and she had been carrying the weight carefully ever since. "Hi," she said. "If you want me to be I can be. If you want me to be the person who made choices she can't defend in 3 sentences, I can be that too." I wanted to say 100 things, but my mouth has always believed in first drafts. "Why didn't you let me decide with you?" I asked. "Because I didn't trust you to choose me over being right," she said. "And because I didn't trust myself not to choose you over staying alive." Kai stood still enough to be useful. Detective Pham had taken one step inside and then stopped the way people stop when they understand a thing that makes them wish they didn't. He said nothing. The room was a courtroom that had decided to let the witness ask the questions. "You wrote me letters," I said. My voice sounded like paper cut in a clean line. "You wrote me warnings about the man I was falling in love with." Her eyes flicked toward Kai and back with a tenderness that did not belong to the stranger's face she'd just worn. "Because they watch him," she said. "They watch him because of his mother, because he asks questions, because he carries a bag and doesn't explain it. If they think you trust him with the wrong parts of your day, they'll think they can reach you through him. I couldn't let them try." I thought of the first letter, the one that had cataloged the way he would touch me, the way he smiled. "You made him a threat so I would keep him at arm's length," I said. "I made him a mask," she said, "so you'd understand how easily a face is used as an alibi." "And if I'd left him?" I asked. "You didn't," she said, and there was relief in it, but not victory. Kai stepped forward then, not like a man defending himself, but like someone willing to be a bridge for a heavy thing. "My mother," he said, "wrote me from places that changed their names depending on who was in charge of naming. I found letters in my bag I hadn't put there. I came to Linh because the way my mother's capitals briefly leaned to the right when she was lying reminded me of a woman whose job is to tell truth what it did wrong. I didn't know your sister then. If she saved my mother's ledger, I want to put it where it finally belongs." Mai's mouth softened at the word ledger like it was a child's name. She couldn't stop herself from loving properly. She nodded toward the velvet pouch on the table. "It's in there," she said. "Numbers written by hands that thought they were safe, names that paid a tax on being unimportant, notary seals, dates. A map of how to disappear a person with sufficient paperwork, and a river that takes orders." Detective Pham moved first, because men like him anchor themselves in procedure when the floor is storytelling. He took the pouch, opened it, and slid out a small book whose spine had learned to bend from being asked to hide. He did not touch the pages. He stared at them the way you stare at an old teacher who turns out to have known everything you thought you invented. "If this is what you say it is," he said quietly, "it will end careers. It will end things that shouldn't have started." "I know," Mai said. "That's why I asked Linh to come alone first. I needed her to see this room before an ending walked in and started calling itself justice. He nodded, and then he did a thing that seems small and is not. He left. 15 minutes, he said, a promise to his job and to us. I'll be outside pretending not to guard you. When the door closed, the three of us were left in a room that had been built for exactly this number. How did you survive? I asked my sister. The question was an animal I had kept in a cage for 7 years. It walked toward her, patient, expecting to be recognized. Badly, she said, and I chose to love her for the way she refused poetry when it wasn't the truth. Sometimes in rooms like this, sometimes on roofs, sometimes in a bed with a hand I loved on the back of my neck, and I let myself have that much joy, even though I knew it would be taken. Hoy was a good liar. He loved me as if that could make up for the part of him that loved what power does to the weak. When he decided to make me an example, he still believed he was protecting me from something worse. And the boy by the river, I said. She winced, as if the word boy were a key in the wrong lock. I carry him, she said. He has no name. I give him mine when I can afford it. I write it on donations. I don't sign. It doesn't fix what needs a priest. It gives me mornings and clear. I walked to her because pretending there were better options had exhausted me. Up close, the short hair was practical, not an aesthetic. The eyes were mine, but braver. The scar at her temple was from a night our father had explained that love sometimes gets drunk and mistakes itself for catastrophe. We had agreed not to let that be true. We had failed in the same house. If you had told me, I said, I would have chosen you. I wanted you to choose, she said. But I wanted you to choose because of you, not because my face asked you to. And my letters, I use the only language you never ignore, she said. Ink and urgency. I took her hands. They were warm and wrong and perfect. I can forgive you later, I said. Right now I need to love you. She let me. There are embraces that apologize, and there are embraces that take attendance. Ours was the second. When we let go, gravity remembered to be itself. The room returned our breathing. On the wall, the red thread was not a cliché anymore. It was a map of two women believing the same thing at different times. What happens now? Kai asked. And the way he asked it was how a man asks for permission to stay. Now, Mai said, you go where the ledger tells you, Datek. She stopped, smiled at me as if to ask for permission to keep living in the world that required certain titles. Pham will take it and do what he can without causing the building to fall on him. He's good. Not perfect. I kept him imperfect on purpose. Perfect men are easy to bribe. And you? I asked. I don't get to stay, she said. Not as the woman you think your heart deserves. I'm a noun the ring would like to decline to 0, but I can stop being a ghost that only visits you when you sleep. I wanted to throw something then, not at her, but at the idea that survival asks you to live as a rumor. I looked at Kai because I could. Because the letter that had told me not to trust him was written by a woman who loved me too much to believe that love and danger can share a room without a chaperone. I'm sorry, he said, and the phrase meant everything it could, for what my family's story has cost yours, for how easily a man carrying a bag looks like a threat in the photograph someone else prints. Your mother, Mai said, is a hero who didn't get the good scenes. She took books that were supposed to be burned and put them in rooms she could hope her son would find. She was messy. She left circles in newspapers so a boy would ask questions. I watched you long enough to know you'd keep your tenderness even when the city tried to rent it out by the hour. Kai nodded at the floor because the floor was the only thing that could hold that. Tell me what you need, he said to me. Stay, I said, even if the room makes you want to run. I can do that, he said, and his left corner smile, my letter's warning label, had the decency to be simple. We left the room together. In the corridor, Detective Pham was every inch the man pretending not to be relieved. He took the ledger with hands he could defend in court and told us to go home by routes that were not obvious. If they realize what we have before we want them to, you'll know, he said, because the city will suddenly be too kind. That's how it apologizes before it hurts you. We did as he said. At the stairwell, someone had chalked a dragon eating a cloud. The cloud still enjoyed it. On the street, the heat had decided to be an accomplice again. We moved through it like neighbors pretending they were not related. At the corner, Kai touched my hand the way you touch a door before asking it if it minds you entering. I leaned in without ceremony. There are public kisses, and there are private ones disguised as public. Ours was the latter. It wasn't about hunger. It was about promising to stay when discovery does its worst. We kept moving. At my apartment, the kettle finally found a good reason. I made tea. Kai sat by the window where morning tries on its signatures. Mai remained downstairs on the street, a new ghost with a body, waiting for the detective to ferry the ledger without dropping his future. The city applauded nothing in particular again. I took out the notebook, the index to a life, and flipped to the end. The final entry was numbered 143 and written more slowly than the rest. 143. The 12th of October 2025, dawn, rooftop. When the light arrives, pretend it was always here. Tell her you forgive her later. Love her now. If you can't love her now, love her small and often. I closed the book. It felt like switching off a machine that had tried to keep me safe by making me believe in magic. Tomorrow, I said. Tomorrow, Kai agreed. That night, it rained with intent. I slept as if the city had decided to let me. My phone was obediently quiet. At 5:02, something like a dare woke us both. Air making room for light. We went to the roof. The river rehearsed dawn the way an actor rehearses a monologue that has saved lives before. The city put on its alibi. I've always been this beautiful, it said, as if beauty were a verdict. The sky took notes. Mai was already there. She had brought nothing but a plastic bag with oranges and a small radio that insisted on being on, even when the music wasn't sure it should. We used to steal fruit from the market and make ourselves sick, she said by way of good morning. This will be less criminal. Oranges make everything look like forgiveness. She peeled one and handed us pieces. I put the wedge between tongue and truth and let them argue. Behind us, the city rehearsed faster. Pham will call when it's safe to be brave in public, she said. He'll ask you to come in and explain how you recognized a man's handwriting after he had trained himself to tremble in different places. You'll be very good at it. They will ask about me. You won't answer. You won't lie. You'll just say, not yet. And you? I asked. Will you keep being not dead in secret? For a while, she said. And then I'll be not dead in a way that requires paperwork. I'm tired of rivers. Where will you go? She shrugged. Somewhere my face can retire. We ate the oranges. Juice made our fingers honest. Kai looked at us and not at the city because he understood that sometimes a skyline is an excuse not to look at what matters more. I hate you, I told her, And then, because we were finally speaking honestly, I love you, I hate you, I love you harder. That's the right order, she said, smiling with a mouth that had survived. The radio decided on a song from when the world was younger than our parents' regrets. The wind did its job without calling attention to itself. We stood there together, three people who had forgery in their blood of signatures, of stories, of selves, and decided to believe in what the light says when it arrives without knocking. When the call came mid-morning, Detective Pham did not waste adjectives. "We have them," he said. "Not all. Enough. Bring your notebook. Bring yourself. Bring someone who will tell you to drink water if you forget." We went. The day did its duty. I explained loops and notches and the way ink holds grudges on cheap paper. They nodded and wrote down more than they understood. Kai squeezed my knee under the table like an oath. By afternoon, men with badges had begun to pretend they had suspected their colleagues all along. By evening, the Zephyr had an open mic and a girl confessing to crimes unprosecutable again. We went anyway. Not because we needed poetry, but because rituals repair holes. We sat in our back table. We ordered sesame cookies. We unwrapped them from whatever the day had to say. The newspaper inside had only ordinary circles. "You didn't ask me to trust you," I said. "I wanted you to want to," he said. "I do," I said, and it was not the romantic declaration the movies crave, but it was the louder one. "I want to." Outside, the alley changed shape again and then remembered it was ours. On the way home, a child had drawn another dragon on the landing, this time letting the cloud eat the dragon back. Balance, it turns out, is a neighborhood sport. At my door, no postcard waited. That felt like an apology and a compliment. I pressed the key from the room with the word "forgive" carved into my palm until it left a mark it did not intend to last. Then I put it away. I slept. The city let me. In the morning, dawn tried on its alibi again. I let it. I put on water. I looked at the old letters, my sister's, my father's, mine. I looked at the notebook and considered burning it. Instead, I slid it behind a row of books no one visits, not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to decide when remembering gets to interrupt my day. There were consequences, of course. There always are. People who had been powerful in small rooms were less powerful in larger ones. Names on brass plates learned new verb tenses. Detective Pham came by twice with expressionless donuts and stories with jokes that weren't jokes. He asked for my signature on a page that let other signatures introduce themselves to prison. I gave it to him with the notch in the left foot he pretended not to notice. Mai sent me a postcard. It was of the cathedral again, the stones forgiving. On the back, no instructions. Just 3 words in a hand I can now tell from mine at a glance. I am here. I put it on the refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a lemon next to Pham's card, where it had been for years. I didn't call her that day. I wanted to practice not hurrying either love or forgiveness. At noon, Kai texted from the footbridge. No future timestamp, just now. I went. He had a paper bag with 3 oranges and a matchbook with Hush on it. He flipped the matchbook open. Inside was a keyhole sketched in someone's ordinary blue ink, the same little hello that had been in the corners of those photographs. We laughed because the universe, when it decides to be decent, sometimes overdoes it to keep you from arguing. "Coincidence?" he asked. "Timing," I said, and he grinned the left side first. Not a warning label anymore, just a mouth remembering a job it likes. He touched the back of my neck. Electric certainty again, without the cold behind the ribs. The bridge held us as if hired for it. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "Somewhere with a table," I said. "So the truth has somewhere to sit." We went. We ordered 2 coffees. We would let go cold because we were talking. We told each other small things with the care of people who have learned that small things are a country you can live in without paperwork. We did not speak the words future or forever. We said yes to now as if it were a vocation. That night, I took down the first letter, the one that had warned me away from this, and I read it again. The don't glared less. The notch in the H winked as if to say, "I knew you would disobey me elegantly." I went to the mirror and watched my mouth not know how to smile and then remember. In the glass, the woman who had been a ghost tilted her head, and I did too. We didn't say anything. We didn't have to. We had built a room that knew our names. When dawn arrived the next morning, it did what all alibis do when they are finally honest. It told the truth and let itself be believed. The city went on boiling broth into faith. Scooters rehearsed their complaints. Somewhere, a ledger sat in a box in a room that had decided to be brave. Somewhere, a dragon and a cloud negotiated dinner. Somewhere, a detective told a joke he didn't think was funny and someone laughed because they wanted it to be. And in a kitchen with windows that sweat in weather like ours, a kettle began to mutter. The envelope on the counter was not a warning anymore. It was a story that had found its ending. I made coffee. I put my thumb on the capital of a new day. The downstroke was firm. The lift was clean. The crossbar climbed a little at the end like a staircase to somewhere worth arriving.